What is up, everyone? We are back with another College Hoops preview. Season starts in less than 2 weeks. We're here to talk about the Big East tonight. Less teams than last week. We did the ACC last week. If you want to go back and watch that, that's also here on the Run Pure Sports YouTube channel for free. We broke down all 18 teams in the ACC last week. We only have 11 teams here tonight for the Big East, so we can spend a bit more time on each one. With the season starting in 2 weeks, if you want to join us over at runpuresports.com, we've got all sports. We got the NBA starting tonight. We got a big UFC pay-per-view this weekend, NFL and college football, obviously rolling along. Hockey's underway as well. So we do core plays, projections, playbooks for every main slate of the season for college hoops. So go ahead and join us if you like our takes here. Gav, I'll bring you in. We're kind of, not on purpose just because we went in alphabetical order, but we're kind of going 5-1 as far as the strength of the power leagues. We did the ACC last week. The Big East, at least coming into the season on KenPom, ranked fourth of the major conferences. How you doing today, man?
Yeah, doing good. Excited to talk about the conference. I think, generally speaking, I'm kind of in line with KenPom. I think the top of the conference doesn't quite have the ceiling that it had in previous years, but at the same time, there's no way to deny that the bottom of the conference is just immensely stronger than it was in previous years. And when you have a stronger bottom half of the conference, those kind of bubble teams that don't quite make it, like a St. John's last year, like a Seton Hall that won the NIT last year, when they only had 3 teams make it to the tournament, that's how it helps you kind of get the 4 bids, potentially 5 bids. I think there's a multitude of teams that can make it. And then kind of the bottom half of the conference is a dealer's choice, kind of whatever, your flavor of the week is. But like you mentioned, small teams we can dive a little bit further into. Excited to get going.
Yeah, last year, 9 of the 11 teams were top 60 to end the season at KenPom. And then obviously we had Georgetown and DePaul down in their own section. And yeah, they only got 3 teams in, but they were all top 3 seeds: UConn, Marquette, Creighton. But yeah, let's go team by team. We always go alphabetical order here. We'll start with Butler. Gav, 18-15 last year, successful year 2 for Thad Matta. I thought they end the season 61st at KenPom, 9-11 in conference play. They lose some key pieces, though. Posh Alexander, DJ Davis was really good for them last year. Jalen Thomas graduated. But they bring in some interesting pieces as well, led by Colby King from Tulane, who was on a pretty deep Tulane team last season. Jamie Kaiser, top 60-ish recruit last year, didn't work out at Maryland. Didn't shoot it like we thought he would coming in. He was tabbed as a pretty much dead-eye wing shooter, and that did not work out at Maryland. But Thad Matta brings him in here. What do you think about the offseason moves for Butler overall?
Yeah, you mentioned it was a pretty incredible season, like improved 35 spots on KenPom. They also had a pretty sneaky good kind of core 4, right? Posh, DJ Davis, Pierre Brooks, and Jamal Telfort. I'll start with kind of losing DJ Davis, right? We kind of identified him as a guy whose O rating sustained against higher competition. He was clearly kind of the 3-level scorer that didn't really need to be a catch and shoot guy. Could definitely develop as his own, even as a 6'1" guard in the conference. So losing him, yeah, I think is definitely not ideal. You had the rotating bigs, like their weakness was 200th and 2-point defense percentage. Like teams that got to the rim had a good amount of success against them. But I'm kind of taking a contrarian stand on Posh, right? Posh, to me, kind of the more data that we just get about his career, he kind of feels like a smaller Xavier Johnson to me. Immense on-the-ball pressure, can slash to the rim merely from just his athletic advantage that he has over other guards. But I don't know if he is a conduit of winning basketball, like of any sort. Has no sort of like sample in terms of being able to kind of enable a team. He wasn't even the main guy last year. It was really through like DJ Davis, Pierre Brooks, and Telfort. So yeah, I think Posh, while he'll be probably a really strong mid-major point guard. I think when you start talking about a power major lead guard, I think is Butler might even be a little bit better suited just to get the ball popping a little bit more. You bring in Colby King, who's an interesting piece, right? He was highly touted at I believe Wisconsin, right, early on.
St. John's.
Mid-year. St. John's left mid-year, goes to Tulane. Tulane had a really unique offense in that they really more played through kind of a hub five than a true point guard. So yeah, he has quote unquote point guard minutes. He also doesn't really have a ton of minutes really as a lead guard initiating and facilitating offense. So there's a little bit of open issues with that, but was still a great open jump shooter, kind of what he was dealing with Tulane wise. Patrick McCaffrey, Fran McCaffrey is like close friends with Thad Matta. Patrick naturally kind of went there after Iowa. I even saw in their scrimmage, dude, he's running like pick and roll ball handler sets with screen. It's kind of funky. So, maybe he gets out of the 20-minute rut that he was stuck in at Iowa and has a little bit more upside. But, the other big question is just with the bigs, like Andre Screen is there's a lot to like about him, right? He even improved on an elite rebounding and block percentage that he had at Bucknell, at Butler, at the power conference level, but he's never played more than 52% of minutes. So on the season. So there's a little just bit uncertainty on that front, but still plenty of tools. I think finished 61st, projected 83rd on KenPom. Actually, I think got a little bit more upside than that. Like this could be a team easily inside the top 75, kind of 60 to 70-ish range, I think is where I'm ended up on them.
Yeah, I agree with you there. There are teams that we're going to be lower on than consensus. I think I'm higher on this team than KenPom is. We saw a big-time tempo increase coming into year two, Gav, from 277th all the way up to 120th. Combine that with 319th in bench minutes for DFS. This is a rock-solid team to target. We saw it last year with Posh, DJ Davis, Pierre Brooks all being viable nearly every slate. Now, I think you hit on the big one for me is Andre Screen. Mata has leaned on his starters, and Andre Screen, he was on the short side of that platoon with Jalen Thomas last season. But like you said, he looks like the first shot at the starting five. And there's not much other size on this roster. So I think he could be sneaky for us, especially early in the season. Like you said, good rates at Bucknell when he was a starter there before transferring here. So yeah, Andre Screen I like. And then the trio of backcourt pieces, King, Pierre Brooks led the team in scoring last year, shot 41% from three on 6 attempts per game. Really nice transfer hit for them last year, coming over from Sparty. And then Telfort, man, like coming in from Northwestern, I did not have him having as great of a season as he did. Absolute smash. So Mata has hit on these transfers early in his time here at Butler. So I'll be interested to see how King does. Kaiser, I think, brings some needed wing shooting to this roster. Telfort's always going to be a good like cash type of play just because the peripherals are so solid, and playing 34.7 minutes a game also helps. Any DFS thoughts here? Any other thoughts on the roster?
Yes, Screen is. We need to hit on this more because I think Screen is going to be one of these guys that's going to be an elite DFS asset at least for the first probably week and a half, 2 weeks until they fix his price. It's probably going to be kind of in that I'd imagine mid 5K range. It's actually incredible all the stats that he improved going from Bucknell to Butler. Like even his O rating improved and sustained versus tier A and B. It's just a guy that I don't think that we can miss on. Like injury wise, if we get an injury to Patrick McCaffrey, he's been in and out of Iowa lineups for both physical and mental reasons over the years. Like Finley Beesjack, had a 104 O rating in Big East play, came on much stronger later in the year as a young guy. So yeah, I think that's basically where we start, right? Is Screen. Telfort's going to be the typical mismatch 3-4 swing. And Pierre Brooks is going to be the 3-point shooter, as you mentioned. So kind of like fits together relatively well. Generally like the team kind of heading into the year and it's Screen and DFS early.
Yeah, just peeking at their early season schedule, they get SMU that second Friday of the season at home, kind of like that spot. They'll definitely be on the slate. So um, that's it with Butler. Let's move on. Let's go to Connecticut, back-to-back champs.
I've heard of this team before.
Yeah, Google some of these players. Yeah, massive losses here. Tristan Newton out the door, Don Klingon, Steph Castle, both lottery picks. Cam Spencer also out the door. They bring in some high-level transfers. Aiden Mahaney, shooter from St. Mary's. I'm sure you'll touch on him. Terrace Reed, the big man from Michigan, interesting pickup. And then Liam McNeely, top 15 overall, 5-star recruit coming in as well. What are your thoughts on the offseason here? You can give your eulogy of the UConn season. We've been early on them each of the last 2 seasons, so they have done us really well the last 2 years. But this is a lot of talent to replace.
Yeah, I mean, what is there really to say about this team? Like, it's probably the best collective coaching staff. It's the best schematic X's and O's offense. It's really hard to poke holes at. Like, you could even argue their biggest transfer portal gets were just retaining like the coaches that they had on staff. Guys not taking the head jobs like Bama did, who Nate Oates lost all 3 of his assistants before last season to head coaching jobs. But UConn, they keep them all. It's also a program. Look, they've had 7 guys in the last 2 years that are currently on an NBA roster, right? And when you look at 2 years ago, it's like the Sonogo on-offs weren't drastic because you had Klingon behind them. The Hawkins on-offs weren't drastic because he was such a nothing burger on defense that it almost kind of just switched it out and made it null and void. The thing is, you replace Jordan Hawkins with Cam Spencer, who was literally the #1 O rating in the nation last year. Like, I don't know how you could flush the nuts more than that. You replace Sonogo with the best defensive big that we've seen in a few years, and you kept one of the 5 best point guards in the country in Tristan Newton, like if not one of the 3 to 5.
Maybe the best transfer portal get since the transfer portal was,
it could be, we'll see what Hunter Dickinson pans out, but yeah, like Newton's in the discussion for sure. The thing that's what I can say about it is the coaching staff is elite. The talent drop off is apparent, and that there's a lot of unproven guys here. Hassan Diarra has never really been a starter in his entire career. From Texas A&M, went over to UConn. And like even watching the scrimmage, it wasn't really like he's being the initial initiator and facilitator of offense creating stuff, right? There is a point where you don't have to be really a true just breakdown point guard in an Hurley offense that's going to scheme guys open at a much higher rate than other coaches in the country.
Yeah.
But he did not look like a natural point guard. And Aiden Mahaney is not that either. I love Aiden Mahaney. You're going to find a few guys higher on him than me. He's the Cam Spencer replacement, the Hawkins replacement. He's definitely not going to be those guys his first year. He actually even came off the bench in their first scrimmage. He is a good shooter. He's not the creator that he was kind of billed initially to be, and doesn't have to do as much at St. Mary's to the same extent. So there could be a little bounce back where he just gets a lot more open shots and is super useful. You bring back an Alex Caravan who, I don't know, people are saying he turned down 1st round contract money, and now I see him like at the back end of 2nd round mocks like early in the year. So he's a great shooter. He also shot like 65% of every single jumper that he took as unguarded because he's the 4th or 5th option, which is not going to be the case. He's going to be at the top of the scouting report. Samson Johnson looked horrible. I mean, was nowhere at any point of that entire scrimmage other than when someone is throwing him a lob 6 inches from the rim and he can dunk it. Other than that, he was completely useless. So yeah, I would question the Terrace Reed acquisition or transfer portal whatever you want to call it. He's going to be a high volume rebounder. He's also nowhere near as athletic with the upside of a Samson Johnson. So if you don't get upside Samson Johnson, then you just have basically a platoon at center. You get Liam McNeely, who's kind of the ideal, frosh, high IQ, no real holes to poke at, an elite shooting tool, is going to be fine at the 3-4 spot. And then the two freshmen, Solo Ball and Jalen Stewart, now going into their sophomore year. They're the ones that you're relying on. They have to take not only a step, but an immense step for this team, even to sustain even close to what they've had in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean that team, their top six was so good last year that they didn't even need even decent seasons from Solo Ball and Jalen Stewart to win it all, because both those guys were really bad. DR, I'm not really buying as like a lead point. It's just such a drop off from Tristan Newton. He's also way smaller than Tristan Newton. Tristan Newton's like a 6'5" lead guard. So this team is noticeably smaller overall. Aiden Mahaney, also not the biggest guy out there. Kind of agree with Caravan. He's this year's Tyrese Proctor, I think, as far as national media, like just kind of expecting a guy to be an All-American when I just don't buy it. Like, yes, good player, solid player. Can he lead a top 5 team and be that superstar? I'm not entirely sold on it. Like you said, catch and shoot 3 guy. Johnson and Reed, kind of with you there. Not great upside. I actually thought Samson Johnson was going to play better last season. He was pretty awful, mainly because he couldn't stay on the court. Over 8 fouls per 40 in Big East play. He's just not going to get it done. I'm with you. I think the ceiling of this team lies with the younger guys rather than the guys who are getting more of the pub. Like, people are talking about DR, Caravan. I think it's McNeely, Solo Ball, Jalen Stewart, that if this team is going to be top 5 good, those guys are going to have to be much better than the ancillary pieces that they had last year. The good thing is they have some time to kind of figure it out. Their November non-con is super easy. Five of their 6 games are against teams outside the top 300. But once the calendar turns to December, we're going to find out quick, Gav. They are home against Baylor, at Texas, and then a neutral against Gonzaga.
Yeah, I mean, part of their success has derived in the last 2 years from just absolutely storming non-con, kind of taking a nap like early conference schedule, and then back half just turning it on and then blitzing the tourney. There's kind of a couple other, just I don't know, call it nerdy things about this team. Like, 4th and 7th best Ken Pom defenses the last 2 years. That's also a lot easier to do when you have guys like an Andre Jackson, guys like a Donovan Clingan, even like Tristan Newton wasn't a bad defender, but he's a big body guard that you can't really go through. It's hard to see how this team really translates. I more trust Hurley on the offensive side than the defensive side. And with that, one of their main advantages has been the offensive glass, right? 12th last year and 2nd the 2 years prior. Really a top 12 offensive rebounding team. The more Terrace Reed plays, the better I feel about that. But that was also very indicative of Sonogo's and Klingen's prowess on the offensive glass. You also add Tristan Newton. Like, it was the 2 best assist percentage years of any UConn team ever. The best Hurley team in assist percentage before Tristan Newton got there was the RJ Cole team. That was 135th. So does the ball really get popping as much enough when you don't have a Tristan Newton creating in the ball screen game, being a threat off a screen, off pin downs, kind of off the Hurley off ball screen? So yeah, this might be like last year I woke up in a hot sweat after the first game and saying, yeah, we need to bet this team. But there's just I just don't know how I get to betting this team at any of the current prices available. And you say the swing pieces are the young guys. I think like the swing piece is almost Dan Hurley. How high can Dan Hurley coach this team into the Big East and the national rankings is basically what it comes down to, because this is not a top 5, probably not even a top 10 roster by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I think I'm more 5 to 10 than 1 to 5 on this team. But, and again, I say that, we've been extremely high and extremely early on UConn the last 2 years. So, that could change by mid-December. Like I said, they do ease into the season. Sacred Heart, New Hampshire, Lemoyne, A&M Commerce, and Eastern Shore in their first 5 games. So, they'll be able to get their feet wet before early December comes, and we'll see how they match up against Baylor, Texas, Gonzaga, all top 20 teams. Any last thoughts on UConn here?
Not a ton. I mean, kind of needled it to death there. Hard to see him finishing kind of outside, 15 to 20 range. Probably I'm more like 8 to 13 range for me personally.
Yeah, same. All right, let's go to another awesome team. Last season, Creighton, 25-10. They end the season 11th at KenPom, 14-6 in conference, top 10 offensive efficiency team. Big losses here as well. Their 2 engines, Trey Alexander, Baylor Shireman, off to the NBA. They bring in Pop Isaacs from Texas Tech, Jemiah Neal from Arizona State, and a couple of recruits, top 40 guy Jackson McAndrew, and a Euro that we will talk about as well. What are your thoughts on the offseason here for Creighton? Big-time losses for a team that relied on Alexander and Shireman for 35-plus minutes basically every game from mid-December on last year.
Yeah, I mean, they were top 25 nationally on both sides of the ball on KenPom. Yeah, it's not only that, it's Baylor and Cherry's pretty much all of their solo shot creation from last year, right? It's when the offense breaks down and there's not much to do in the last 8 seconds, what do? Well, throw it to one of those 2 guys, you're going to be in a much better spot. Now it's Pop Isaacs in that spot, right? He had a pretty terrible year last year. I mean, like a top 100% shots rate at a sub 100 O rating. That's like pre-Final Four Caleb Love type, usage and efficiency. 29% from 3. Maybe that clears up playing in a Greg McDermott offense that's a little bit more conducive to good open 3 looks than McCaslin in his first year. He was also top 350 in assist rate, so maybe there's some playmaking upside there. You bring back Ashworth, who is just a dead-eye shooter. You could actually kind of argue that he had a pretty poor year shooting 3-point wise for his acumen. Like, he only shot 35% on 229 threes. He was 46th percentile in unguarded threes, which as a guy with his ability should be way higher.
Right.
So like there's upside in him even being a better 3-point shooter. Pop at least has some of the creation upside. And then, I kind of buried the lead, but you bring back one of the, at worst, 5 best big men in the country. And Ryan Kalkbrenner, the best drop big now without Edey, doesn't foul, elite rim protector, and a rim funnel defense. There's a lot to like, but I think we also need to touch on this guy from Montenegro, Fedor Zugic, right? I think there's going to be a theme this year where there's a couple guys that we see from overseas that are just going to be at a different caliber than we've seen in the past, right? You think about some of the guys from like Eastern Europe that were good players in recent years, like Tubelis, like Philip Petrusev at Gonzaga. These were guys that, I mean, like they barely saw the floor their first year. It's hard enough to even get your feet under you in the U.S., much less then carve out a role on a team, be productive, et cetera, et cetera. With NIL, like these guys are making more money than they're going to make in pro ball playing in, Barcelona or whatever, making $1 million in NIL. So like, and I looked at Zugic, like, man, it's movement shooting, which is just going to be elite in a Greg McDermott offense. There's size. He can play the 3, he can play the 4. I wasn't as high on Creighton until I came around to the whole Zugic thing. And if he's
that's my first note on this team. That basically that exact same sentence.
Yeah, like there wasn't a ton to like outside of Kalkbrenner. Like Ashworth Pop doesn't inspire me a ton, but brother Zugic, I don't think he has like the playmaking of Yakinsionis and Igor Demine, but brother, the shooting, especially the movement shooting too, like is going to be an elite tool for a Creighton offense that thrives on that.
Yeah, and they really need that to replace Shireman because that's who that was last season. So the starters probably going to be Ashworth, Isaacs, Zugic, Mason Miller, and Kalkbrenner. You touched on Kalk. Stone lock for first team, all conference, probably an All-American candidate. first team. Now that the top 2 scorers on this team are gone, like if they rely on him for even more scoring, this could be a 20-10 with 3+ blocks type of season for Kalkbrenner. This could be an all-time great center season. He has led the conference, Gav, in field goal percentage and effective field goal percentage each of the last 3 seasons.
With barely shooting 3-pointers, which is even more crazy about that.
3.1 blocks per game, 129 O rating, 14th nationally in effective field goal percentage, 9th in true shooting, top 50 block rate, 10th nationally in 2-point percentage. He shot 70% from 2 as a guy who's playing 35 minutes a game. Doesn't foul, like you said, only 2.2 fouls called per 40. This is a superstar, best defender in the conference. And I think that the ceiling is even higher than he's shown, given the amount of scoring that's departing. So, if you're in our Discord for Run Pure, you got Calc at 50-1, I believe, for the Wooden Award. That has come significantly down. I think he's around 20, 25.
I think there's some 40s out there still too. I really don't even mind that, honestly. I do think that he gets discounted because he doesn't put up, I would say, as many defensive counting stats with the way he plays defense versus like a Janai Broom. But remember, so a couple, let me kind of wax poetic just about that in Calc, right? He had a career high in percent shots last year, right? That was with Baylor, with Trey Alexander. Baylor was also top 100 nationally in defensive rebounding percentage. Kind of the issue with Calc has been that he's been like a 7.5 rebound guy. It's not been like super impressive versus the Dickinsons, who are 10.5, 11 rebound guys a game. It could really open up this year, in addition to the fact that he shot 54 threes last year, right? Shot about 29.5%. That is going to be a swing skill for him if he wants to play in the NBA. If he can hit threes and play defense as an elite rim protector, even a good rim protector in the NBA, he's going to get looks. So I think that also grows. That's kind of why I like Broom too, is an evolving 3-point game. I think there's 40s out there that you can still get. I wouldn't even mind that, honestly, because that is the ceiling. Is if Creighton's legit, if Zugic is what he's billed to be, if Pop rebounds, if Ashworth shoots threes kind of at the percentage that he's probably more slated to shoot, then the upside of this team, I don't personally have them in the top 10. I think it's more of a high floor team than a high ceiling team. So I'm kind of more in the 10 to 15 range. But if they're top 10, Calc's going to be at the center of that conversation.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm not as high as Ken Palm and Torvik. But yeah, I mean, he played 34.7 minutes a game last year. Just the counting stats you can put up by being on the court that much as an awesome big man who, is going to get more usage this season. It just has to happen. So outside of Kalkbrenner, who else do we like on this team? We talked about Zugic and Isaacs. Mason Miller was mainly like a corner standing 3-point shooter last year, but was really efficient when he was given looks. 132.9 O rating, was 12th nationally, shot 45% from 3. I think he's an intriguing piece moving forward if he can sustain some of that efficiency with probably pretty clearly actually more volume coming his way. Any last thoughts here on Creighton?
It's interesting with Mason Miller, right? Because I think there's a situation where Jemiah Neal doesn't shoot that much worse than him from 3 and is still a way better defender, right? Mason Miller was another guy kind of like Caravan, who when you're the 4th, 5th option, you shoot 60% of your shots unguarded. So he's probably also in that situation this year. I don't know how he sees more than 23 to 26 minutes a game just with Neal there, kind of because of what I believe in Zugic. Yeah.
This team is deeper on the wing than a couple others that we've talked about. All right, let's keep it moving here. Let's go to DePaul. The key losses that I have on the sheet here is the entire roster, because that's true. So they bring in Chris Holtman, kind of an odd departure there for him at Ohio State. And they bring in 10 transfers, Gav. I'm not going to go and name all of them. They're all on the screen here. Why don't you pick out few of these guys as players to look forward to this season for DePaul if they're going to make any sort of jump?
It's hard not to make a jump when you go 0-20 in Big East play the year prior. You know what I mean? 1-19 is an improvement. I think it really starts around from a macro sense. The one thing, Chris Holtmann brought in a bunch of mid-major guys who can generally, for the most part, be effective three-point shooters. And so when you have a multitude of effective three-point shooters around a guy with the recruiting pedigree of a laden blocker, I think the conversation starts there. Former 5-star from Little Rock, Arkansas, goes to Arkansas, doesn't play, and is so, fucking jaded that he says, I'll go play at DePaul, one of the biggest dumpster fires in all of college basketball. Probably not. I don't know. We'll see what it does career-wise, but still a guy that's, I think, at worst, an athletic two-way splashing point guard. And if the shot develops, there's a really interesting piece to be had here long-term for DePaul. Jacob Myers kind of going to be the other guard with him, right? Coastal transfer, 6'2" combo guard. Like he shot 40% from three. He also only shot 102 3-point attempts, which is like not a ton. He shot 144 close twos, not even total 2-pointers. But so he's really going to be more of like a mid-range kind of guy, probably catching the ball, taking one bounce and shooting it, for most of his shots, I would imagine. I think Skogman is pretty interesting. This is a Davidson transfer. He sat out the back half of last year with a foot injury. It's a 6'10" power forward center with like stretchability, 37% and 46% last 2 years from three. I think he could be a really interesting piece that we look to, especially for DFS early on. And then kind of the round out of the core is Isaiah Rivera, right? Former Colorado State guy, spent 1 year at UIC last year. Did shoot extremely well. He shot 40.5% on 163 attempts. Other than that, you don't really got anything worth tool-wise from him. So I think that's kind of where the core starts. And, like I said, can't physically be worse than 0-20. So, yeah, I think a step is coming for him. But like KenPom has him 3-17, which is 4 games behind the next team in the conference. So I think they're still safely in last, but certainly better and headed in a better direction than they were previously.
Yeah, 3-29, 0-20 in conference. Ended last season number 304 on KenPom. KenPom's got them 166. Torvik has them 119 to start the season. That would be one hell of a season for Holtmann if he can get that done. I don't see it. A couple notes. Holtmann has been between 238 and 281st in tempo every season at Ohio State since 2018. So pretty average tempo, a little bit slower than DePaul has been playing. I agree with you on blocker. I think he's the guy to look towards here. Fresh start here at Arkansas after being log jammed there in a weird situation with Musselman. Wasn't a perimeter threat, like you said, more of a slasher, but the runway is wide open for him. You have to think that part of him coming to DePaul was Holtmann kind of saying, hey, you kind of have the keys to the car here. Former top 50 recruit, like you said, clearly the guy with the most pedigree on this entire roster. Wanted to mention NJ Benson real quick for DFS purposes. Was at Missouri State, 1.04 fantasy point per minute last year. Was super efficient in a crowded front court there. 128.0 rating, 13th nationally on offensive rebound percentage, top 50 block rate last year. If he gets any sort of leeway with minutes, I think it's something to monitor for DFS early on, probably a cheap piece that we can look towards. Any last thoughts here on DePaul?
Yeah, the rates on Benson are good. Benson could start because he's highly complementary to Skogman's 3-point ability. So, yeah, I think if we get good prices on either of those guys, they could be interesting. Connor Enright from Drake, right? If your name wasn't DeVries on Drake, you basically stood in the corner and watched Tucker just go to work every single play. But yeah, I think, definitely closer to the KenPom 166 than the 119. But yeah, that's even a massive improvement, even at the 166. So I'm kind of good where KenPom is.
Yeah, and right, probably some insurance on the Layden blocker pickup. Shot the lights out from three. 43.8% was top 50 nationally last year. So got to keep an eye on if blocker doesn't get it done. All right, let's keep it moving here. We've got Georgetown next, the other basement dweller from last year in the Big East. 9-23, 192nd is where they ended up the season at Ken Palm. 2-18 in conference. So we get both of the shit teams from last year out of the way. But I do like Georgetown more than DePaul, a good bit more than DePaul here, Gav. They lose Supreme Cook, Dontrez Styles, Brumball, Ish Masood, Jay Heath, and Wayne Bristol are all out the door. Team could not guard last year. They plummeted, to 321st in defensive efficiency. That they kind of got rid of all the shit defenders on this team and brought in some interesting pieces. The headliner, Malik Mack from Harvard, had an awesome freshman season for them. Curtis Williams was a top 100 recruit last year for Louisville. Kind of like the elder statesman of the group, Micah Peavy, comes in from TCU. And then there's a couple of freshmen that could start right out of the gate. Sorber, number 41 overall, is a big man, and Kayvon Mulready, a wing guard, top 75 guy. They got a late addition, a 7-footer from New Zealand that picked Georgetown over Carolina, actually. We'll talk about him in a bit, but just overall thoughts on the roster turnover here for Georgetown.
Yeah, I mean, you compare the two basement dwellers, Georgetown and DePaul. Georgetown having Malik Mack, Jaden Epps, Micah Peavy, all three of those guys are better than any single player DePaul has on their roster right now. It's not even a discussion, right? So that shows not only how much further DePaul is away from the field still, but also how much of strides that Georgetown made. You mentioned 321st defensive nationally. It was a top 100 offense, and that was even with an inefficient Jaden Epps. But one of the big issues was, 360th and 2-point defense. So the two ways to cut that off is either defend at the rim or prevent guys from getting to the rim. And one way you do that is with a Micah Peavy, right? TCU's top defensive Evan Mia BPR last 3 seasons. You mentioned a senior adult. He's a low volume 3-point guy, but he's also off a career best O rating at TCU in a kind of a more wide open offense. So, you have to like those 3 guys. Yeah, Malik Mack. I mean, he was the 50th point guard in his class, like recruiting wise. Goes to the Ivy League, newcomer of the year, second team all conference, absolute lefty gunner, right? Like 6'4", 6'5". Mega usage rate, also showed really good playmaking ability, 33rd in assist rate while being top 500 in steal percentage in a conference that doesn't turn the ball over. It's a bunch of slow white guys shooting 3-pointers. So yeah, maybe there's a case where the Ivy League just doesn't see guys like that come through, and he got a little bit of bump kind of from a first-year athleticism discrepancy, and the tough shot making doesn't translate, but there's just way too much to like about him upside-wise. So yeah, you add those guys, you even throw in like a fielder, 123 O rating on limited run. That would have been second nationally, just by the way. Not that that's wholly relevant in the minute allotment and usage that he was given, but 40.7% from 3 on 54 threes, likely 6-man. You like that. You just want to see the offensive fundamentals improve. 342nd in shot selection, 236th in turnover percentage. Both should be alleviated with Malik Mack, with a Micah Peavy, and we'll see. Can't be, like I said, can't physically be worse than last year. It can be, but it won't be. They'll be a little bit better than last year, no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the very least it's going to be a fun team, right? Like they're going to score. They're not going to be as bad as they were defensively last year, and they have a promising backcourt. I think that's more than definitely some of the ACC teams we talked about last week can say. I think this is going to be a fun 1-2 punch with Mack and Epps. We talked a lot about Mack, but Jaden Epps returns after playing 35 minutes a game last season. Top 40 usage rate nationally. Played 84% of conference minutes. Top 100 assist rate. played 37 plus minutes in 7 of their last 8 games. We talked about it going into last season. Gav, Ed Cooley finds his guards that he wants to play, and he gives them the ball and lets them play the entire game. So, Epps, we saw in DFS, that was a guy that we identified early, and, we kind of rode his price tag up to 8K. I think both him and Mac will be really nice plays this year for DFS. Fielder, I like him long term. Hopefully he continues to grow. And then I mentioned the New Zealand 7-footer coming over. There just isn't that much competition in the front court here. But it's him and the freshman Thomas Sorber, number 41 overall. So we'll see how the front court shakes out. Can't really speculate on that too much. But what we do know with this team, Gav, is that they are going to have the same 2 guys with the ball for the majority of the season. Any last thoughts on Georgetown here?
No, I'm not going to lie. I don't have nothing on this New Zealand guy. I've spent extra time this year digging into these European or non-US based frosh from overseas. I didn't even know about this guy until recently. So that's a wait and see situation.
Yep.
Other than that, Sorber was billed as like a guy that's gone from fat to skinny with really great feel, which means can face up, can facilitate out of the post or the high elbow, has good touch around the rim, can rebound, but also has major conditioning issues too, supposedly. So, yeah, we'll see what we got here. It's going to be a fun DFS team, like you said, though, no doubt.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to Marquette. Really interesting team to talk about here as they go from the Kolek Oso team. It's just a different style of roster, and just Shaka always has to do things his own way, and what he's doing now is different than most teams in the country. Like it's player retention, it's kind of not bringing in any competition to your young players and seeing what you got. It's worked out for him. Marquette last season, awesome year, 27-10, 2 seed, number 13 at KenPom to end the season, 14-6 in conference, top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Like I said, they lose their 2 key pieces, Tyler Kolek, Oso Ighodaro, both playing in the NBA now. They bring in a couple back-end top 100 freshmen, but this is all right, guys, from last season, we're expecting you all to take a next step around Cam Jones.
Yeah, I mean, this was a flag playing team for us last year. They tie for second in the Big East. They finished 13th in KenPom. Oh my God, they lose to NC State in the tournament. Like
so brutal.
I hate that team so much. But it's also a team that's lost 4 NBA guys in 3 years without using the portal, right? Even go back to Justin Lewis, the year prior to Omax Prosper. And the whole, like you mentioned, like the whole thing about what made Marquette so brutal to deal with was the ability of Oso and Kolek to invert the pick and roll, for them to pistol screen on the sideline with Cam and Kolek and get guys running off screens. I've said, this year, kind of without Kolek and Oso, we won't see Marcus Howard usage, because I don't know if we'll ever see anybody with 40% usage rate. But this could be literally a top 5 usage rate in the country, if not the highest usage rate of any power conference player. You need David Joplin to step up. He did not take the offensive step that you needed him to efficiency wise with an increased role. Stevie Mitchell, that's kind of the third member right at the core, like a really defensive minded wing who can slash and lived at the rim, had over 120 attempts at the rim, but was also a limited 3-point shooter. But mainly it's Joplin and the 101.90 rating, I think, is kind of the big swing skill of this team. If Joplin's going to be bad, this team is cooked. If Joplin is going to go back to the efficiency that he had as the 6th man when Omax Prosper was there, then this team has a chance to compete for kind of I don't think they have second place range. I kind of see them more 3 to 5 this year. You have a Ben Gold step in. like, an Australian stretch big, but boy, you know what I know he's not is Oso and Omex Prosper. So it's big shoes to fill with limited guys, especially if Sean Jones is not going to be there with his ACL injury. I think his status is still in the air. I haven't seen anything about it recently.
Yeah, I think he's probably out for the year. It really sucks to lose him. He was going to start at point this season. It's a huge blow. Cam Jones has always been better off the ball in a extremely point guard driven offense. Gav, I think that's my biggest question with this team. The returning players on this team average less than combined for less than 6 assists per game. So I'll be interested to see how they kind of navigate that early. This was one of those teams where, the ball's in Kolek's hands and in Oso's hands every single possession to start it off. Like, are they going to play Cam Jones at the point? Is that going to be the best way to utilize Cam Jones? We'll see. I think he's a shoe-in for first team all conference. Like you said, the usage is going to be great. He took 29.5% of their shots when on the court last year with Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro. I tend to think that the guys that he's around now are more beta type scorers. Like, they're not guys who demand the ball. So I'll be interested to see how he plays, just because, we talk about moving up team scouting reports. The scouting report for anyone playing Marquette is going to be, if we stop Cam Jones, can this team even score? I think that they are going to need big time jumps from the bench guards, Zayd Lowry and Trey Norman, who didn't give him anything last year. It's always tough to get minutes early as a freshman under Shaka, but this team isn't very deep. Like we said, they didn't bring in any transfers. So this is him relying on his player development. To give him credit, he has done it year over year. So I don't want to discount that too much. But this is also, like, how good are the pieces around Cam Jones? Like, I think that there is definite downside in this roster overall.
Yeah, it's hard to question that there isn't. It's where does it come from? Yeah, like Chase Ross shot well from 3, but was the 5th option again. The on-offs for Kolek are pretty rough. Like, there's it's over 7 points on offense and over 5 points on defense, like 12 points per 100. In addition to the awkward positions that they could put guys who are not used to defending in space to defend a Kolek in space in a pick and roll game is kind of what made the whole offense click, and really what did it the last 2 years. So I don't doubt the defense of this team, especially if Sean Jones comes back. That even more, contributes to the defensive aptitude of this team. But like the offense could be really rough. If Ben Gold isn't anything other than just a 3-point shooter, like if Cam Jones is getting swarmed every possession by every team, then it could get ugly outside that. I really don't know who could step up outside of Joplin to be that kind of next guy.
Yeah, I think it's going to have to be the guys who barely played last year, and Lowry and Norman. DFS-wise, Cam Jones, probably going to be 9K plus. If he's not out of the gate, we plan him a lot early. They do have a tough non-conference sched, Gav. I'm not sure if you took a look at that. They have 7 games against top 100. They play George Mason the first Friday. They've got a road game at Maryland. They play Purdue, Georgia, Iowa State, Wisconsin, and Dayton. So testing this team early, this might be a team that we find a couple spots in there to fade them. Any last thoughts on Marquette here?
Yeah, nothing else to add DFS wise. I think the spots that we're going to bet Marquette on are home games against teams that struggle with press defense or press offense.
Yep. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's go to Providence. Big time losses here yet again for Providence. Devin Carter, Josh Aduro, just 2 absolute beasts last year. Devin Carter's in the NBA. Aduro, I believe, was a 2nd-round pick. And they lose Ticket Gaines and Garway Duwall transferred out. We'll talk about him later. And they bring in some, I think, pretty uninspiring transfer gets. What are your thoughts on the roster turnover for Providence here, Gav? Before you do that, let me give their stats from last year. 21-14, 59th to Ken Palm, 10-10 in conference, pretty much on the back of Devin Carter and Josh Oduro.
Yeah, I mean, Dev was just not only an incredible DFS asset, but the amount of money I made on his alts all year is just disgusting. It was like plus 10.5 offense on offs. It was like plus 4.5 defense. That's even when you filter by garbage time. Like, he was the entire engine of the offense last year because Pierre and Floyd were clearly not ready to step up in a role when Bryce Hopkins went out. And that was the big bugaboo of their whole season last year, right? Bryce Hopkins at his best is one of the 5 best players. You told me Bryce Hopkins is fully healthy. He's the 5th guy to the lock 4 of the all conference team.
Yeah.
But we have no idea if that's going to happen. Right. He's not going to be ready for the start of the year, it sounds like. So it could be kind of coming in early conference. How long does it take him to get his feet under him? A lot of times you see guys do drastically better their second year. I don't know. That's the big uncertainty with them, right? So you have that. You have Wesley Cardette coming in from Chicago State. He was, as you would imagine, a Chicago State player, an inefficient, high-volume shooter. Mostly slashing. He had a 103.0 rating. It was also versus the 210 strength of schedule. Like, it was just not great. You bring in Jameer Abdul-Rahim, who I think fits a good role, right? One of the things that they were definitely missing was three-point shooting, which is why you saw Devin Carter shooting from 40 feet away from the basket some possessions. He's a proven, legit senior three-point sniper who's going to fill a role exactly what he should do. Bring in Bensley Joseph, two-way bench guard. I think he starts over Cardette. I don't know how you start Cardette over. I've seen like Cardette's going to start over Bensley. I don't know how you start Cardette over Bensley.
I have Bensley starting on our sheet,
and he's fine offensively, right? He's not going to blow the doors off offensively. He's going to be best in transition and when getting to the rim. And they're going to need that in Providence, especially with how much of, as we're going to mention, the big piece coming back like Pierre at this point. If it's not Bryce Hopkins, it's Jalen Pierre. It was super uninspiring last year with a full role without Hopkins, with Devin Carter. He is the big swing piece, I think, of this team, generally speaking. Bringing Crisis Sondiko. I've heard Essendoko. I've heard Sondiko, whatever you want to call him. He's a 7-foot sophomore, really high rates that were ranked nationally, offensive rebounding, defensive rebounding, block percentage, and with a growing three-point tool. So there's a ton of projection that goes into him. There's also a lot of upside, I think, inherently baked in, but that's also a pretty big dice roll. So where you come to is there's a couple too many dice rolls for my liking. Pierre stepping up, Sondiko replacing Oduro. Oduro was amazing last year in Carter's absence too. Like, I don't know if he got enough credit. You lose Oduro, you lose Tika Gaines, who were the two elder statesmen that came over with Kim English from George Mason, now gone. Yeah, there's just too many questions that I have here. I actually think, like, legit, the floor of this team for Providence, if Bryce Hopkins doesn't come back healthy, is last in the conference.
I don't think it's quite that low because DePaul's in the conference, but both Ken Palm and Torvik have them 60th to start the season. They ended last year.
Jaden Pierre and Leighton Blocker and who they have around them. I don't know if there's a lot of – if Bryce Hopkins doesn't come back to 100% Bryce Hopkins, I don't know there's a ton of difference between Providence and DePaul, in all honesty.
Yeah, well, my main point is that both Torvik and Ken Palm have them 60th to start the season when they ended last year 59th with Devin Carter and Oduro and Tika Gaines. Hopkins, I think it was after 14 or 15 games last year, he tore his ACL. So right now, I think they basically said that they want to get him back by like around Thanksgiving time. We'll see, right? I'm sure that they're going to be, they're going to take their time, and projections are always aggressive with stuff like that. I think they're absolute dust without him. I agree there. When he does return, probably on this roster, Gav, one of the highest usage, high major players in all the sport for sure. 0.90 fantasy point per minute 2 seasons ago. I think he clearly will be a usage monster. Cardette, yeah, I don't see it with him. You basically had the same note that I did. Negative BPR, negative DPPR for a bad team. In 20 career games versus Tier A, he shot 39% from 2, 27% from 3, 80 O rating. Goes from super inefficient usage monster to, not that here. So we'll see how that plays out. Probably not well. The Abdur-Rahim piece, I actually like that pickup. Got his first chance to start last year at Georgia. A career 36% shooter from 3. Got up 6 attempts per game and only 26 minutes per game. Doesn't turn the ball over. Really good free throw shooter, 34th nationally. I think he's a nice secondary piece on a team that doesn't have that many pieces. Benzie Joseph, I agree, should start at the point. Jaden Pierre had a negative assist rate to turnover ratio last season. Does he have it in him to take a big step forward? O rating under 100 last year. I'm not sure, Gav, that he's the guy you want eating up the additional usage on this team. Their bench has Corey Floyd and Rich Barron. Both were absolutely miserable last year. Barron shot it well from 3. I was actually surprised to see that he shot 43% because I feel like every time we used him, we regretted it immediately. This team, Gav, to start their conference play, has St. John's, Marquette, and UConn, by the way.
That's when Bryce Hopkins is going to be the least healthy he's going to be the entire year.
Yeah.
Of conference play, at least. He's only going to get healthier.
Yeah. We didn't mention they do have a reclass top 25 guy, big man. So that's a full wait and see for me. Big man from Nigeria. Torvik has him for 54% of minutes. Who knows there? But just kind of something to monitor on a team that is extremely thin. You have before we started, I said that there were 2 teams where I don't really know how it's going to shake out as far as who plays, who has the usage. This team, before Hopkins comes back, I have no idea.
Yeah, it's going to get a little funky, especially the 2. When we were talking about, I don't know who starts between Cardette and Joseph. You also have Floyd and Barron that are also guards. The only thing that I think I can count on is that Sondiko is going to play a much larger minute role than he did at Harvard until he fouls. Other than that, Jaden Pierre is going to play full minutes. He's also a .63 fantasy point per minute guy last year. And like we said, had the full role of being the point guard and just get the ball to Devin Carter as best you can, and didn't even do that well. So, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I think the floor of this team is way, way lower than people are giving it credit for. Okay, Jaden Pierre, a non-healthy Bryce Hopkins, and who's the third guy of that team?
Benzie Joseph, I think.
Benzie Joseph. You're taking that over Malik Mack, Jaden Epps, and Micah Peavy?
No. I like Georgetown over him. I said DePaul. I think, but all right. So
all right. If they're second to last in the conference, do I get the win?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
Take that.
Now,
they could easily be second to last.
So let's look real quick before we move on. So their first 5 games are all against teams outside the top 310. But then they have a neutral against Oklahoma and MTE over Thanksgiving week. I think that this is the time, Gav, to start fading them. Ken Pom in the look ahead has them as a 2-point dog to Oklahoma on a neutral. That will get clicked if that's anywhere near then. And then they play BYU and St. Bonaventure, Rhode Island. I think that there are going to be spots to fade this team early, especially before Hopkins comes back. Any last thoughts here?
Negative. And take away the Seton Hall roster changes because I need a minute.
All right, Seton Hall, big-time roster changes. Kadari Richmond, we'll talk about him in a couple minutes. Transfers out after just an absolute monster season. Led them to the NIT championship, the postseason NIT championship. They lose Dre Davis and Alamir Dawes. Jaden Bediako, really underrated season for them last year. Played extremely well at the 5. And they bring in a handful of recruits headlined by Garway Duwall from Providence, who we just talked about. Scotty Middleton, top 100 recruit last year from Ohio State, comes over. Aligbe from BC, a big man. Yassine Toomey from Evansville. Chance Jenkins from Old Dominion, point guard, also comes in. Last year, Seton Hall, really nice season, 25-12, finished 50th at Ken Palm. I thought they kind of got screwed not getting into the back end of the tournament. Would have been fun to see Kadari Richmond, in one of those playing games or like as an 11 seed early in the tournament. 13-7 in conference. Really, really good defensive team under Shaheen Holloway. 33rd in adjusted defensive efficiency last year. I think that portion of it is probably going to hold this season. But, man, the way their starting five lines up, I think they're going to struggle to score here. Gav, whenever you're back, just let me know. But a starting five of Duwall, Adaiwusu, Isaiah Coleman, Prince Aligbe, and Yassine Toomey. None of these guys are or have been in their careers efficient scorers, lead scorers, go-to guys, anything like that. So I was basically just saying this is probably going to continue to be an elite defensive team, and I really struggle to see how they score the ball efficiently with the losses that they have.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, the on-offs for Kadari are some of the most insane I've ever seen in the country. It's like 6.8 on offense, 13.6 on defense. That's like over 20 points per 100 possessions, which tells you what he meant to that team when he was on and off. The thing is, there is a fair amount of projection in this lineup, right? You have kind of high pedigree former recruits in Garway Duwall and Scotty Middleton, who are definitely more defensive minded, or I should say more established defensive assets than they are on the offensive end, at least at this point of their career. Not to say that they can't, but it's still a lot of projection. And yeah, you go from being led by Kadari Richmond to, led by Isaiah Coleman. Yeah, that's kind of rough, right? I mean, it's tough to accentuate. I was saying, like, who plays point guard? Like, I guess Adewusu plays point guard.
They're saying that they're going to let Duwall try to play point.
Yeah, right. Okay, yeah. And I'm going to be 6'4" with a 10-inch dick when I wake up tomorrow too. I'm sure. I mean, that's ridiculous. No, it's going to be Adewusu or Coleman playing the point. But the thing is, this team is just going to be, like you mentioned, one of the better defensive teams in the conference. It's going to be an all-out 1-5 switch. You don't have the stone-footedness of Bediako, even as much as he gave you on the offensive rebounding, especially side of the ball. Like, this team was so bad that their two best offensive sets were either Kadari takes the shot or Bediako picks it off the glass and puts it back in. That was literally the two best ways they scored last year. You also lose Alamir Dawes, who was kind of the main spacing guy, right? Just the YOLO three-point shooter. In addition to a Dre Davis, who I don't think the Dre Davis losses felt that much because you're replacing with guys like Duwall, guys like Scotty Middleton. So, yeah, overall, it's going to be an elite defensive team. Shaheen Holloway, I think, is still actually an underrated coach, even as much pub as he got from beating was St. Edwards beat Purdue, or was it Kentucky? I can't even remember what year that was. Purdue.
Actually, it might have been both. I think it was both. Yeah, they beat Kentucky, Murray State, and then Purdue.
Imagine that. But yeah, it's still an offense led by, like, Dylan Adewusu. I think there's still a little bit of offensive upside baked into him. He's never really had kind of a full role. I think he could be kind of a mid-teens, like, point per game scorer. But everywhere
you
else,
love that little fire hydrant. You think mid-teens? He scored 8 points a game last
year. Well, he had Kadari and he had Dawes was kind of the first look off him.
I know.
But I think just with the pressure that he can put on the rim, I think he actually is probably the best suited to play. I think Coleman's really more of an off-ball guy, but yeah, sketchy offense, elite defense. I think potentially even better than the 33rd defensive efficiency rating they had last year on Ken Palm. I think this could be a top 25 offense or defense for sure.
Yeah, DFS wise, probably not much from this team. They're not going to play fast. They're going to play good defense, and they can't score. This is an unders team for sure. But yeah, I think their ceiling, if they have one, Gab, is behind Duwall and Middleton making big jumps in year two after both really not doing much in year one. Middleton did shoot it extremely well on limited volume, 45% from three. Team is going to need his shooting gravity, especially with the roster that they have here. Any last thoughts on Seton Hall?
No, I think you're right. The ceiling is probably middle of the conference. They somehow finished fourth last year, but you lose an All-American guy in Kadari. Don't see how that sustains. So ceiling, middle of the conference. Floor is probably, I guess it could be worse in the conference. I just don't see it being that because the defense will provide such a floor to the team where I think they finish kind of, at worst, second, third to last, something like that.
Yeah, KenPom has them 10th out of 11. They have them below Georgetown. I think
I think they're light for sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
I kind of like seeing Hall above the 90s in this spot.
Yeah, like the defense is going to carry them. Also, if you look at their non-con, super easy non-con schedule. I think, it starts easy. They played their top 100 opponents are neutral VCU, home OK State with a new coach and new roster, and at Rutgers. So pretty soft besides those three. We'll have a better idea as to what they're going to do offensively before they get into conference play. All right, let's talk about a team that we've been waiting on show to talk about, St. John's, a team that I was lower on in the field last year. And man, they proved me wrong. Patino got them all the way up to 21st at KenPom to end the season, 20-13, 11-9 in conference. Some turnover here. Obviously, Soriano, Jenkins out the door. Jordan Dingle is also gone. Glenn Taylor and Chris Ledlum. But they bring in Kadari Richmond, who we just talked about from Seton Hall, and Davon Smith from Utah. Arguably two of the best transfers in the entire country. Aaron Scott from North Texas, who we know. Iwachukwu from SC to give them some big man depth, and then a couple of freshmen. So Gav, why don't you just outline the changeover in roster, because there is a lot of it here, losing, three of their top five scorers from last year.
Yeah, I mean, they finished fifth in the ACC. You start 59th, you finish 21st. You missed the tourney, finishing 21st in KenPom, which is pretty funny. They had the 57th best defense in the country on KenPom, right? Remember when Patino just had the meltdown? I want to say it was like late last year, just about, oh, my guys can't move their feet, they're slow, yada, yada. Remember that whole thing? Well, he certainly fixed that. Now this team is just riddled with long, athletic guys that can move their feet at an extremely high level. I think I thought I had the stat here, but yeah, no, so Rick Pitino in like his last 13 seasons at Louisville had a top 12 defense. I want to say 11 of those 12 years. It was actually insane. So the guy knows defense, and with the tools that he's allotted here, you bring in Kadar, you bring in Davon, you also bring in Aaron Scott, who's like a 6'7", kind of lengthy wing, three. Could play really anywhere from the 2 to the 4. One thing that you notice, in the St. John's Rutgers scrimmage that we have to talk about was, bro, they were pushing the ball heavy, every single possession, pushing it. And maybe there is some point to that where it's a scrimmage. But I think also without having a lumbering Soriano, without having guys like Ledlum who were just planted to the ground, I think the team is going to be much more athletic, much faster.
Yeah.
This is a really good team.
This team's gnarly.
The highest I've seen this team, Norlander has them 12th. And I was like, wow, I thought I was high on him. 12th might be much, but I think this could absolutely be a top 15 team in the country. The defense is going to buoy him. You mentioned Davon and Kadari. It wasn't good enough to bring in the best point guard in the portal. You had to bring in the 2 best point guards. Jeremy Roach is not either one of those guys as a point guard, flat out. So you bring in both of them. Everybody can basically slash and get to the rim, put pressure on the rim. And I think the unspoken part about it is Zuby Ejiofor, like stepping into, I don't think it's going to be, the role that Soriano had, the 28-minute role, right? He has Vince Iwuchukwu behind him, but I think he's one of the most like impressive upside bigs to step into the starting role in the country.
Maybe like 25 and 15, something like that split. You think?
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. Like his upside is elite rebounder and brim protector in the mold of like an Adu, almost Jonas Adu, kind of really similar skill sets. And I sent you a clip of like when Zuby spun on one of the Rutgers bigs on a drop step, and that's when the light went off. Like, okay, the offense will be there just from an athletic standpoint of being on the floor. He also had 10 offensive rebounds in the games, so that obviously helped. But yeah, I think we also haven't brought up like Simeon Wilcher, dude, is going to be a firecracker scorer off the bench. That's just like a nice to have and not a need to have. Who stayed there. There's a lot
RJ
to like
Lewis
about
too.
this team.
We haven't talked about him.
We haven't talked about
after
RJ
the
Lewis,
injury
dude.
year.
Yep. Even in games when he was playing like 20 minutes a game, was really high usage, and in games he was relatively streaky, I feel like, on off, but fuck, there's upside there offensively when he's a full year off the injury. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like top 10 is a little too aggressive, but I'm kind of more in like the 15 to 20 range, I think, for me, which I feel like I've said that about a lot of other businesses.
I think the upside is higher than that, honestly. With this coach and this roster, this is definitely a top 15 to 20 defense. Just with the guys that they have. I think I'll start with Ejiofor, former top 50 guy at KU, finally gets his chance to step into a starting role with Soriano leaving. You mentioned the 10 offensive boards in the scrimmage. His offensive rebound percentage would have been 6th nationally if he had enough minutes to qualify. Top 20 block percentage nationally. I think this is one of the biggest breakouts players that we have in the country, and I think was both of ours our top breakout guy in this conference. He's going to start day one. I think he's going to be cheap in DFS. He is going to be a slam for us early. I think my only question is like, how does he make it work with Davon and Kadari? But smart basketball minds have made 2 lead guards work before. The spacing fit is, I think, the only real issue on this team. They're going to be so good defensively. They're going to run 78th in tempo last year, was a bit faster than I anticipated. I would expect them to bump that up this season. We talked about just the jump in athleticism going to Davon, Kadari, Aaron Scott, RJ Lewis being healthy. So, we talked about fantasy points per minute for teams. You can really see like the upside. So, we had to talk about Seton Hall. Those guys are 0.57, 0.62. Here are the fantasy point per minutes for the 5 starters for St. John's. Davon Smith, 1.15. Kadari Richmond, 1.11. RJ Lewis, 0.98. Aaron Scott, 0.84. Zuby Ejiofor, 1.07. You just don't chart teams like this in college, just having so many guys who are so efficient. And I think it really, shows the upside of this team. Smith and Richmond, 2 of the better rebounding guards in the entire country. Both of them averaged over 5 assists a game last year. This is kind of a, I don't know. It feels like a super team in college just because of the 2 guards. When we talk the ACC, I went UNC over Duke because of the guard play, and it doesn't get any better in the entire country than these 2 guys. So I'm super excited about this team after being lower than the field on them last year. I just love the roster. The only issue is going to be spacing. Maybe you can talk about that some, but yeah, I just love the upside. There's so much talent. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think you have to start the ball in Kadari's hands. He was the drastically worse catch and shoot guy compared to Davon Smith. Kadari was 8 for 39. He had 39 catch and shoot opportunities all year. that tells you how much the ball was in his hands at Seton Hall. 8 for 39 on those. Like, he was a 22nd percentile jump shooter on a point per possession basis. You start with the ball in his hands. You work to Davon as the first look. Like, Aaron Scott was also 38% on 3.5 threes per game, and just a super, polar opposite pace North Texas team that was, I don't know, I can already tell you without looking, one of the 3 slowest teams in the country. And now he's going to go to, 363. So I think 4th, but now he's going to a offense and / defense that creates offense, much more suited for his skill set. So he'll provide the spacing, but yeah, I think also having the Simeon Wilcher insurance on the bench, I think, like, if spacing gets rough and teams keep you away from the rim, there's going to be worries against teams that run like a pretty efficient pack line, like a Seton Hall, who's going to keep you away from the rim with long rangy wings. There is a little bit of worry against teams like that, but if the shooting comes along for this team, then yeah, I could say top inside the top 10 upside, but I'm more kind of, like I said, 10 to 15.
Yeah, before we move on, we should talk about the season that Davon Smith had last year. So
I didn't realize he was higher fantasy points per minute than Kadari. That's pretty wild.
Yeah, well, he started 20 games. Okay, so he didn't get starts until basically the start of conference play. In his 20 starts, he had 10 games with 10 plus assists. He had a triple-double. He had 3 other games where he was 1 peripheral short of a triple-double. 43% assist rate, was 3rd nationally. And then I found this interesting too. Low volume, but shot 41% from 3 last year, Gav. Probably an outlier because he hasn't ever shot super well from the free throw line. But it's good to know that it is in there and that he's done it before. But yeah, did not see that season coming from him. Absolute wagon down the stretch. We rode both of these. Maybe that's why I'm so high on this team, because I probably played more Davon Smith and Kadari Richmond, you and I, than anyone else in the lobby, and they really carried us. So yeah, any last thoughts on the Johnnies here?
Yeah, just Davon, you mentioned the 3-point percentage, 86 percentile catch and shoot point per possession. It was definitely low volume, was also assisted on 72.4% of his 3-point makes. So that's kind of what warmed me up, I think, to St. John's a little bit, is the fact that he can play more of a combo guard role, but also has elite playmaking upside. So yeah, we're obviously high on these guys.
Yeah. Last note, quick peek at the non-con. Home against New Mexico, neutral Baylor, the week of Thanksgiving. That'll be fun. Neutral Georgia, and then home against K-State. So reasonable non-con with 1 stiff test there in Baylor and a couple of teams that are right around.
Baylor's issues the last 3 years, they can't keep teams away from the rim. Just been letting up dribble penetration at just an immense rate. And if that's what St. John's does, so that could be an interesting spot betting wise.
All right, 2 games left. We got Villanova up next. 37th last year is where they ended up at Ken Palm. 18-16 though. Lots of losses for Nova. 10-10 in conference. Bunch of turnover here, Gav. They lose Justin Moore. Eligibility finally up for him. Tyler Burton, who I expected more from last year. Hakeem Hart, Mark Armstrong, TJ Bamba, Brandon Housen, all gone. They bring in a handful of transfers. Wooga Poplar, Jameer Brickus from LaSalle, Tyler Perkins from Penn, I think, are the top 3 there. And then 2 top 75 freshmen. What are your thoughts on the roster turnover here for Villanova under Kyle Neptune?
Yeah, the worst part of the Villanova roster is what it says next to the head coach and Kyle Neptune. He's such an idiot. He is the worst parts of Jay Wright epitomized into one. Tied for 6th in the Big East last year. They finished 15 spots lower. They actually were 24th with 2 games left in the regular season. Then they lose at Seton Hall. They lose to Creighton, kind of craters a little bit more. And we were kind of high on this team. Maybe that's why I'm jaded. But yeah, it just felt like you had so many assets on the team that just weren't utilized not even weren't utilized optimally, just weren't even utilized like efficiently. It was crazy. But they lose everybody other than Eric Dixon and the off-injured Longino. You replace it with an undersized mid-major transfer in Jameer Brickus, Wooga Poplar, who was really a transition monster at Miami, and Enoch Boyakai from Arizona State. In addition, I guess Boyakai came Arizona State to Fresno to Nova.
Fresno, yeah.
But and then Tyler Perkins. Like I just don't see how that if Neptune couldn't get that out of Bamba and Burton and Armstrong and guys like that, I just don't see how he's going to get it out of the talent that he brings in. So that's basically where I'm at with this team. I think 20 might be Ken Palm's worst ranking of any power conference team. I think that is just so ridiculously ludicrous. I don't see how this team is even top 30. I might even say, like, I don't even know how they're top 40. I have them basically back end of the middle of the conference.
Yeah, so they finished 51st in Neptune's first year. I think that's about where I would have them here, 40 to 50.
That was with an NBA wing at Cam Whitmore.
Yeah. I don't buy the 20 at all. This is the first team that we've talked about in a while that have been lower on the field. I just don't see it with the top 6. Like, Eric Dixon's going to have to be even better than he was last year. So he entered the draft, but returned, kind of the last piece of, the old guard from Villanova, top 60 player on Evan Mia's BPR. Started 102 games the last 3 years, Gav. Like, man. Obviously an all-conference guy. Scores number 2 through 5 from last year are all gone. This could be another just big upside usage spot for him here. Has never really rebounded the ball as well as you would want, but I think part of that is he's a big guy playing a lot of minutes. Good defender. This team was 13th in adjusted defensive efficiency last year. That actually kind of surprised me a bit. But outside of Dixon, I don't see much here. We were kind of high on Wooga last year. He disappointed for the most part at Miami. Also, does his style of play even fit with this team? That's going to operate at bottom 15 tempo. I just don't really see it with this roster outside of Eric Dixon. Kind of odd fits overall.
Yeah, I remember we were in Chicago for the Champs Classic last year, and at that point, Wooga was shooting like 65% from 3, like in the early part of the season. It was incredible. He drops off to like 32% in ACC play, playing in an opposite scheme. If you can't utilize TJ Bamba in a better role, who's a guy who has more solo creation in the half court, then I don't know how it translates to Wooga. Maybe Longino turns into like the cheap 3-point shooter that we play on Nova. Part of the reason that they're so slow is it correlates to the fact that Eric Dixon doesn't get a ton of rebounds because they send everybody to the defensive glass, so they don't run at all. I don't know if that's going to change. I do think that it's hard not to see Dixon's rebounding tick up. I mean, he's going to be this entire team and more. So, like, yeah, if you take Eric Dixon off this roster, it's the worst team in the conference. I'll put it that way. It's basically DePaul with Eric Dixon. Is basically how I put it.
No, it's Seton Hall with Eric Dixon. This is where I'll go.
All right, fine.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's not spend any more time on Nova. We're both much lower. Let's look at their non-con real quick since we are lower on them. So a couple easy ones out of the gate, and they're at St. Joe's. And then neutral against Virginia in mid-November. Neutral.
Oh God, that game. Oh, Villanova, Virginia. Oh,
what's that total? About 118?
No, it'll be between 105 and 110. I'm telling you right now.
Ken Palm's got it 65-59. That's funny. Neutral against Maryland the week of Thanksgiving, and then home against Cincy. So that neutral against Maryland will be low scoring too. Maryland.
So Cincy, trust me. I don't know how Cincy's going to score, and they got a lot of defenders. God.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a couple unders early for Villanova, likely down the pike. All right, let's do the last team here. Xavier. I know you've been waiting to talk about Xavier on the show. Last year, 16 and 18, 56th at Ken Palm is where they ended up, 9 and 11. Quincy Olivari, now on the Lakers, I believe, as an undrafted free agent. Saw him playing in the preseason the other day. Des Claude transfers to USC. We'll talk about him tomorrow. Abu Usman is gone. They bring in some really interesting transfers, though, Gav, headlined by Ryan Conwell from Indiana State and Marcus Foster from Furman. It sucks that they lost Lassina Traore for the season. He was another big pickup in the transfer portal that happened last week, I believe. Why don't you talk about the roster turnover here real quick for Xavier?
Yeah, forget the 1 year turnover. I mean, this team hasn't defended the rim in 2 years. Well, I guess that, they had the Nunji, but you've basically not had Zach Freemantle and Jerome Hunter for a long time. Like the people that you replaced those guys with last year, here's a list of these guys: Sasha Siani, Kachi Nze, Lazar Djokovic, Gitas Nemiksa, and Abu Usman. That's who you replaced Jerome Hunter, Zach Freemantle, and Jack Nunji with year over year. So, yeah, inherently, they tied for 8th in the Big East. It was not a great year. Now it's Freemantle off the injury. It's Jerome Hunter off. God, he had the heart issue that kept him out the season. Then as he was coming back, it was the Achilles. He's good to go. And you bring in John Hughley from Oklahoma via Pitt previously. So at least you have some sort of a front court, right? You really wanted Traore to be kind of the defensive rebounding difference maker that you could put in there at any point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that definitely hurts. But I thought I was going to be a little bit more on an island with kind of thinking that this was a really sexy team in the conference. It's gotten a little bit more public than I would have thought. Ryan Conwell is, brother, look, like Indiana State and the offense that they had with Josh Schertz was run generally through Robbie Avila as the hub 5, but Conwell was like the dude. 40% on 263s is insane volume and efficiency. He's an elite positional rebounder. His tier A, B ratings. Remember, we identified like Sule Boom. Was it UTEP or UTSA, wherever he came from prior to Xavier?
And then Olivari, yeah,
having both him and Olivari having elite tier A, B, O ratings, and Conwell's is better than both of them. So it's really hard not to see Conwell transferring. Like that could be it's not going to be like first team all conference. I think it could be like all conference honorable mention at like the mid-teen scoring at the high major level. And then Marcus Foster kind of replaces the Des Claude slasher role. 125 layups, but was a 20th percentile catch and shoot guy. So if he starts as the off-ball guard, if he's a 6-man, whatever it is, you still bring in a really strong core of like 6 or 7 guys here in this spot.
Yeah, the team fits together really well, I think. Freemantle coming back, obviously the biggest piece. Missed all of last year. Has been, really dominant when he's been healthy. I think people have kind of forgotten how good he was before all of the injuries. He's a peripheral monster too. We'll have to monitor early what their plan is for him after so much time away, because even the season before last, he had his bouts with injury, but in 22-23 averaged 15, 8, and 3, and over 1.5 blocks and steals per game. So that's a 1.11 fantasy point per minute for those at home there. Conwell and Foster, both good rates too. Conwell 0.91, Foster 1.02. Davion McKnight, really good first season at X after starting at Western Kentucky for a couple of years. Career high in 3-point percentage. You don't see that too often, a guy transferring up and increasing the rates. 116 O rating, really good assist to turnover ratio, 4.8 to 1.6, Gav. This team brought in a lot of mouths to feed, but I think that he is like a rock solid veteran presence facilitator for guys that have shown that they can score big time. Conwell, 17 points per game, Foster 17. We know Fremantle's good for 15 plus. We haven't even mentioned Dante Maddox yet from Toledo, absolute sniper perimeter shooter, 45% and 40% last 2 seasons from 3 on good volume. I think, man, this team just fits together so well. It sucks ass that they lost Traore. I thought he was going to be a great piece and good insurance for John Hewley, who is reportedly on 60 pounds this offseason. Interesting, route to get here between Pitt and OU. Came off the bench at OU last year. Former top 100 guy. So there's just so much talent on this team, and I think the pieces fit really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't even gotten to so Trey Green. Like, if you put Trey Green on Marquette, he might be the second best guard on Marquette outside, maybe third best outside of Cam Jones and Stevie Mitchell. Better than the Chase Ross, Sean Jones, Zay Lowry, Trey Norman types. Like, Trey Green had his spots last year where he came in and was just a fireballer, microwave bench scorer. Dallin Swain had a start a couple of years. He's another high pedigree, like a guy who a lot of people had penciled in as a massive breakout candidate kind of before they bring in Hughley, before Fremantle and Hunter are healthy. But yeah, like, those guys might not even get off the bench, and they're really, really good pieces. So yeah, the Traore loss is less than ideal because all the question marks, or I think most of the question marks in this team, have to do with front court health with Hunter and Fremantle. So not having him hurts that. But if this team stays healthy, I mean, it's top. I think it's top 20 upside for sure. It's definitely higher than the 37 and 30 projection they have on Torvik and KenPom respectively.
Yeah, I think I would probably flop where they have Nova and Xavier on KenPom. I think this is top 3-4 team in the conference. I think I have them over Marquette too. We took some Xavier futures to win the conference. I think that those are good at 10 or 12 to 1, something like that. Just so much depth, so much talent, so much upside, and the pieces fit so well together. Any last thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that betting has to do with the fact of, like, if Dan Hurley's going to beat me this year with that team, so be it. And I wasn't super high on Creighton, so that's where a lot of that stems from. I think as long as it's double digits, you're all right. They're still 8-9 deep. It might be like the best collection of 8-9 guys not named UConn in the conference. So I think a lot to like about them.
Yep. All right, let's wrap up with the All Big East team and the breakout players. We've got them here on the screen, Gav. All Big East, I think, has at least, I'd say, 4 locks.
Yep.
Why don't you go ahead and take away your All Big East team here?
Yeah, this is probably the easiest team to do it for, right? So it's Alex Caravan of UConn. It's Ryan Kalkbrenner of Creighton. It's Cam Jones. Cam Jones probably leads this conference in scoring. I wish they could let me bet Cam Jones lead the conference in scoring minus 110, something like that, because he's definitely doing it more than 50% of the time without injury. And then just Eric Dixon and what he's going to have to mean to Nova. So that's pretty much like the 4 locks, right? And then you get into, I basically have a pool of 3 guys outside of that. It's Kadari Richmond, who's probably the safer of the next 2 because he's not coming off a drastic injury and could be on a team that is top 15 to 20 good, fighting for the top of the conference. And then it's Bryce Hopkins and Fremantle off their respective injuries, just with the upside that they bring. So I think it's a pretty tight pool. Obviously, having only 11 teams versus having 47 like we're going to have tomorrow with the Big Ten helps keep that pool tight. But I think that's basically where we're at all conference-wise.
Yeah, I have the same 7. I have Kadari Jones, Caravan, Dixon, Kalkbrenner, and then both Hopkins and Fremantle with the question marks. The breakout players I thought were a little tougher for this league. The only one that I had as like an absolute lock to break out is Zuby Ejiofor from St. John's. We talked about just the wide open lane for usage that Leighton Blocker is going to have at DePaul. I think it'd be tough for him to fail given the usage. And then I listed a couple others. I like Malik Mack from Georgetown. We talked about how Cooley's going to rely on his guards as much as possible. I think Mack's going to play a ton. And he was only a freshman last year, so still a young guy. Isaiah Coleman from Seton Hall, kind of similar to Blocker, where there's a lot of usage being vacated there, and he's going to step into it. So I think that those are probably my top four. I also added Solo Ball and Mason Miller, a bit less confident in those. Any thoughts on those guys, and then any additional breakout guys you wanted to mention?
Yes, Solo Ball, like at least in the scrimmage, it's one of those guys kind of like an Elliot Cadeau in their scrimmage, kind of like a Seth Trimble, where you just saw a difference in the confidence in which they take their shots. It's not catch the ball, look up, look to the left, shoot the ball again. It was just catch and rip, and he did look a lot better. So yeah, I think Solo Ball is probably naturally, one of those guys to break out just with the team that he's on and the role that he likely has. I'm contractually obligated by friend of the show, Matt Kajeski, to say Ben Gold as a tier 2 breakout. Like there's a chance where he's, shoots decently from three. He gets 6.5 rebounds a game.
He's got to play a bunch.
He has to. I mean, they don't really have much other than him. So yeah. I have to add Ben Gold, and then I'm all on the Layden Blocker train, right? I've had just the Elijah Gibson call wasn't as phenomenal as the Javen Johnson previous year, but another year, another DePaul breakout guy. Part of why I like Blocker is his athleticism and on the point attack ability, surrounded by a bunch of shooters. Like I think he's going to have a lot of open lanes with a massive rolling. He's going to go from like 7 minutes to like 29, 30 minutes a game. So yeah, I think that's probably the largest role increase in the conference personally.
Yeah, a lot of leeway for him to succeed here. All right, we did all 11 teams. Took about an hour and a half. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back actually tomorrow night for the Big Ten. 18 teams tomorrow, Gav. So probably won't be able to spend as much time on each team. I actually enjoyed this more than the ACC just because we were able to break things down a bit more. So we will be back tomorrow night, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern for the Big Ten. And then we'll let you know on the Big 12 and the SEC, the two best conferences in the country. All right, I'm going to wrap this up here. We'll see you tomorrow night. If you're watching this after the fact, all of the conference previews will be up on the Run Pure Sports YouTube channel or at runpuresports.com. For Gav, I'm Steve. We'll see you next time.